if you know you want to get to a certain goal, but you don't know how, if you've got enough of a why, you'll find the how.
Nice.
If you think you know how you're going to get there, but you haven't got much of a why, as soon as that first how doesn't work for you, you're going to probably quit on top of that mountain, you know?
Yeah. Hi, I'm the self-development coach, Johnny Lawrence, and welcome to the Self-Development Podcast. In today's episode, I have the pleasure of chatting with Matt Young, a life and mindset coach based in London. Over the past 15 years, Matt has dedicated himself to studying top performers in both physical and mental fields and has been fortunate enough to receive coaching from some of the world's best coaches. Matt's background is diverse. He's been a professional footballer for 8 years, playing alongside full England internationals, Premier League stars and international managers. He's also run and stand by 15 ultra marathons and 16 marathons. I mean, just take that in a minute. That is absolutely insane. In his pursuit of knowledge, Matt has earned numerous qualifications and certifications in human psychology and behavior. His ultimate goal is to inspire and coach others to live their best life. By empowering millions, he aims to help them unleash their true potential. How are you today, Matt?
I'm very, very good. That was a hell of an introduction. So thank you very much for that.
Mate, I say it every time. I'm a good hype man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be bringing you to my next event, making out on stage beforehand. No, I'm very good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh no, absolute pleasure. I've been really looking forward to our conversation. It's so good to get people that have come from different backgrounds like yourself. Like I don't think I've met anyone that's been in the Premiership sort of area with football and all that sort of stuff and had that sort of level of success in that type of sport. So it's really interesting to me because I suspect there's a lot of growth mindset stuff that comes around that sort of area as well. It's sort of self-belief, self-respect, self-confidence, all them different things to do with yourself, because that's another level of pressure, I would imagine.
Yeah, huge. And I think there's almost a direct correlation between what is experienced in terms of that elite level sports and what people go through. Now, people might look at that and go, but elite and every day. But no, from what I wouldn't be sat here and so passionate about what I do if I didn't see the relatable and transferable sort of skills, traits, behaviors, habits between elite level sports, what I did do, and now what I do, which is obviously coach people and, as you say, to empower them to unleash their true potential. Because I think we all sometimes get caught up in this realm of life, and it's the same with football. You get caught up in the noise, that everything that's going around, and then that can control your emotions, that can control your mental state. On the pitch, you do that, you're out the team, you're released, you're gone, you're finding a new club, you're without a career. If you do that in life, for example, in everyday life, we have these unwanted emotions, we have things that come into our lives that we think that we can't do anything about. The way I see my role within that is educating, helping, coaching, guiding, whatever word you want to use, the people to have those mental and emotional strategies so they stay in control. So
I like the fact that you use the word strategies as well, because that's important. I think that we have a strategy for things. And again, sometimes things veer off the strategy, but at least you had one and you know how to bring yourself back on or take advantage of the potential new opportunity that's come up due to things not going quite the way you thought they would go.
yeah,
So one of the other things that I sort of really relate to you about now, and I'm going to stop short of saying it's the same because it isn't, but this 15 ultra marathons, I mean, marathons are a feat in themselves, and you've done 16 of those, but an ultra marathon, that's another level. And the only thing I can really just, I used to professional wrestle a long time ago. Little known fact, don't know if it is, I don't know if I've mentioned it on here before, but I used to wrestle quite a while ago, and it takes a certain type of person, a certain type of approach, mental attitude, all those things. And just recently, I climbed the Atlas Mountains, and I I don't know what happened, but I got really, really unwell while I was doing it, and somehow I managed to find the mental strength to get to the top, and that showed me a lot about myself.
mhm.
It stripped me bare of all the bravado, all the banter, all the physical and emotional strength, and what was left was there for me to either accept or not. But at least I was dealing with the truth, you know. And I can't imagine. I literally can't imagine. There must be so many times in just one of those ultra marathons that you wanted to quit? Like, can you talk
Uh,
about that feeling, or if you
yes.
even had that feeling?
Oh, I can tell you 100% I had that feeling. 100%. I mean, so this has been to give you a little bit of context, I suppose, here to give you before we, I suppose, get into it, is that I don't like running too much. Like, like
Sorry.
I'm not a runner. I'm not a runner. This is my big thing. Like, what I mean by that is prior to this, I know that's very mad to
That's
say.
brilliant. What a great start to ultra marathon competition.
I don't like running too much. No, it's true. I mean, prior to this, I'd say journey that I've been on. And the reason I say a journey is because I read a book in January of 2019 and I finished that book in February of 2019 because I'm a slow reader. But I finished then. And at that point, I set myself a goal. And that goal was to run an ultra marathon. Now, for context, at this point in my life, I had sort of just my football career had come out of professional football and I was playing part-time football. And I wanted to set myself a goal that exactly all the things that you touched on, that was a truth to me, that made me uncover more within, that made me want to search for more within and see what I was about on a deeper level. And I set myself this goal at the time when I set it in February 2019. The furthest I'd run was 10K. So I hadn't done any marathons. This was February 2019. And then, as I say, in the past, whatever that's been, 4 years and 3 months, that's where all of those 16 marathons and 15 ultras have happened. Because I suppose I've been obsessed with this one particular goal. And like what you said about the Atlas Mountains, I'm not sure if that was a huge goal for you, but there was one for me that when I started, I opened this door to ultra marathons, which before this book I never knew even existed. I thought marathons were it. Um, I realized there's this run in France called UTMB, which is ultimately the mecca of ultra running. Like, if you an ultra marathon runner, then you know about this race, and thousands of people apply each year, and thousands of people get rejected because not because they haven't qualified, but simply because there's only so many spaces.
Mm.
And for me, it has been almost, I'd say, an obsession to run this race. And I've been applying every year, getting rejected. And as you say, I've done what, four 400-mile races now. So the shortest time that's taken me is 23 hours non-stop, and the longest that's taken me is 34 hours non-stop.
Oh my God. Sorry.
And this year, I'm thankful to say I managed to get into UTMB.
Hey, well
So
done.
so
Wow.
that's quite a big thing for me. So in September, I'm going to be going to the Alps, which around Mont Blanc, which is where this race is, and completing this 103-mile race around Mont Blanc. And I can tell you, which your audience will also hear for the first time, after that, my running shoes will be hung up
Well,
because
we'll see.
that is what my plan is. So, yeah, it's a bit of a sort of brief background as to why I don't like running, but why I run.
I was just intrigued. That book you read, was that David Goggins?
It was David Goggins.
Yeah,
God,
I thought it
it
might
was.
be.
And as I say, at the time, it was like my friend had read it, and he's like myself, loves personal development, and loves finding more within, loves that side of it. He was like, "Read this." I was like, "Oh, that's all right, mate. Like, I'm good at the moment." He's like, "No, just read it. Go on." I was like, okay. And it's literally, I suppose, if yourself or any of your readers have listened to it, it's the first page and then I'm hooked. And then
Mm,
obviously his story is immense. His story is inspiring within itself. But then
yeah.
for me, when he taps into this ultra marathons, I'm like, never even heard of this thing. So that was the journey of how that started anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot, but what climbing the mountains reminded me of is that doing hard things gets your mind and your body to work together.
Mm.
And I think sometimes that's what's going on with some people, that their mind and their body have got this like just this game that they're playing, they're not getting along. It's like when my two sons, sometimes they play together really well, other times they don't. But when they do, it's lovely, it works, it's a really good day. And I think when I was up there, I wanted to quit so much. It was so hard and I felt sick, and all these things are going on. But although I wanted to quit, it's not the same as going to quit. And
Mhm.
I knew I wasn't going to quit. I didn't know
Mhm.
how I was going to do it, but I just thought one step at a time, keep going. And just, I'm thinking about 103 miles, and it's going to be a hell of a thing. And I think what you do is you prove to yourself that you can do hard things, don't you? And
Yeah, yes. Sorry to interject, but absolutely in what you said, 100% agree. And where you said about the mind and the body, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but that is literally the cornerstone of my coaching philosophy. It's a mind-body connection. And as I say, when I'm 2 a.m. on the top of a mountain and I'm 60 miles into a 100-mile race, which I have been, trust me, there is everything that's working against me psychologically, physically, mentally, emotionally that is saying, quit, call it a day. This time to finish. What's the point in being here? Is there any reason? All this type of thing. And I think that's ultimately where I've found out most about myself when I've really, even the strategies that I use with clients now, some of them I found on top of that peak because there are times where I'm like, it isn't an option for me. But even though I know that's not an option intellectually, everything, and I mean everything is saying, no, it's an option. Take a way out, take a way out. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey up until now. And as I say, I call it the last dance. It's the last dance for me now for this journey here. And I'm sure after this I'll find another way to uncover some more things.
I mean, there was this moment when I was on the hill where I was like, I was starting to want to entertain the idea of quitting.
Mm,
And I knew that I was literally, I could feel it. Like that you were one mindset shift away from I want to quit. And then it's all about that. And then it all collapses from then on. It's like a really tense knife edge ridge type feeling. It's like, oh, are you going to let this fall in? Are you going to entertain it? You're going to give it any airtime? And it was like I was doing everything I could to just keep it away. And
mhm.
I'd imagine that's what you experience numerous times when you're doing them ultra marathons. That once you entertain that idea and that concept, that's it. It all flows in, and it's like you've let that in now, and it's like just it's getting in power and momentum, and it's coming at you. You know.
100%. And I think one thing that I've learned with this, and again, things that I've uncovered along the way, is that if I try and wrestle with it,
Oh yeah.
it's just going to wear me out. It's going to wear me out. It's going to grind on me. It's like when I'm physically tired and I try and wrestle with the mountains. I'm
Mm.
going to lose that. Not that's not a negative stance. That's just the way that it is. These mountains are unrelenting. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to lose if I want to wrestle with that. What I look to do in these situations is reframe this in my mind, reframe the situation, focus on something else, whatever it may be. So then I'm not wrestling with it, but I'm rolling with it.
Mm.
I'm rolling with what's going on now. I'm not feeling the fact, but I'm accepting the fact that this is where I'm at in my head. And then from there, when I can look at it from a logical, rational, unemotional position, I can then start to pinpoint my next move.
Yeah.
It's the same with life. It's when we get caught up in the emotion. I always say emotion clouds clarity of vision
Oh,
because
love that.
when when you when you get caught up in that emotion, we all know what it's like. You can't think straight.
Yeah.
And you and I are talking on the same length here. When we're going through these challenges, it's the exact same thing. So these are all things, as I say, over the last couple of years, and obviously before that, things that have only served me and obviously yourselves and people listening to uncover more when you face these challenging situations, which is exactly what we said.
Yeah. And I think like in that moment, you make a decision to carry on going, and then everything you do from that point onwards plays towards that decision instead of the opposite, you know, because sometimes we have that, and I might be wrong in its term, but that cognitive dissonance, that disconnect where we're like, right, I'm going to do it, but a little bit if you don't. I used to see that a lot in weight loss with when I used to be a PT. People would come in and go, this time I'm going to do it, and you're like, I don't believe you.
No, right.
I don't believe you. I don't think you really see that person
Mhm.
that's going to be the goal weight that you've got or whatever it is. I don't really think you believe that's going to happen. I think you're just going through the motions a little bit, and that's not an accusation or an unkind thing. It's an observation of like you've got to believe it, because I think it is it Jim Quick. Have you ever read his book
Yeah.
Limitless? And he talks about the mindset, motivation, and method,
Mm.
that they're the three areas that it breaks down. It's either the way you're thinking about it, the reason you're doing it, or the way you're doing it, you know? And I think that's the only ways it can break down, right? And if
Absolutely.
you're really thinking about something and actually you don't believe it's going to happen, then it's not. What's that? Is it Henry Ford? Whether you think you can or you can't, you are right. You
Yeah,
know.
spot on. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think, and I suppose we might uncover this during this. I think there's a couple of different ways that I use for myself and with people that really allow me to tap into believing in that. And I think a big thing of this as well is what I call leverage. So before I do any of these races, before I set out and do anything, before I appeared obviously on this talk with you, I'm thinking about the outcome of who it's going to affect, who it's going to add value to, what's the reason I'm doing it. Because I've conjure up all of these, what people would call their why, but
Mm.
in such deep detail. And when I can do that emotionally, when let's refer back to what we have been, when I'm on top of the mountain and everything is telling me not to, I've got this almost this avalanche behind me that has to keep me moving forward because I've already gone through this process of all these reasons why it's not an option to step off that mountain, but I have to keep moving that way. And for me, that's always been the cornerstone of any achievement that I've had enough leverage, enough of what people would call their why to have to keep moving in that direction. So,
I think what you just said there is incredibly important because I think when people go for things, it's not just important that you acknowledge that you can do it and that you believe in yourself and you see yourself with clarity, what you want, your goal, you achieving it. But it's also preparing
mhm,
those thoughts that are going to come up. So you've got an answer. It's a little bit like when someone asks you a question and catches you off guard and you haven't got an answer and you sort of bumble and then you're more susceptible to sort of caving, aren't you? Because you're not prepared for it. And I think that's really important what you just said about having some sort of prepared answer for those intuitive thoughts or those that inner critic or that mind chatter that goes on in those really hard moments when anyone else would quit. Yeah. And
mhm.
you're like, but I'm not anyone else today.
No,
So
no, it's absolutely true. I mean, yeah, just to latch onto that, an old coach of mine that it popped into my head when you were saying it. An old coach of mine said, "You have to understand that losers and winners both start with the same dream initially."
Mm.
And it took me a while to really understand what he meant, but we're always taught to dream big, go for the big goal, and I don't think that's necessarily the issue amongst people. Don't get me wrong, we have self-limiting beliefs that may get in the way of that, but generally, like what you said, the person who respectfully says, "I want to lose weight," be like, "I don't really believe you." They've got the goal. Whether they do or not isn't generally because they're not knowing what they want to go after. It's the preparation. It's the bit behind the scenes. It's the reasons of why they're moving forward. It's the reason of why now they need to move forward. It's all of them things that we've just spoke about that I think probably add even more weight because we know what it's like when if you know you want to get to a certain goal, but you don't know how, if you've got enough of a why, you'll find the how.
Mm,
If you
nice.
think if you think you know how you're going to get there, but you haven't got much of a why, as soon as that first how doesn't work for you, you're going to probably quit on top of that mountain, you know?
Yeah.
So that's always, I say, a leading point for me. So I'm in total agreement there.
Yeah, and I think I often use the analogy of weight loss because it's such a visual and sort of typical thing. Like most people have gained more weight than they'd like in their life, so they can understand. And obviously, there's varying degrees to that. Some gain a lot, some gain a little bit. But I'd like to believe to some degree it feels the same in their mind. They're still
Mhm.
feeling that unhappiness or that dissatisfaction or whatever. But it's like I've seen it before where I've had mates and we've gone out on a Friday night or whatever, and we're going out for pizza and then that one of the mates is like, oh, I'm not gonna drink tonight, or I'm gonna have this instead of this, and then everyone gets on him, and it's like it's their job to convince him that he's wrong and that he needs to get on with it. And he's got two options in that moment: he either sticks to his guns and takes a bit of banter,
Mhm.
which can get intense, as you know,
Mhm.
with the blokes, or he caves.
Mhm.
But either way, the bit that people find hard to do, and I understand why they find it hard, is to take accountability because they did let it happen. And that's
Yeah.
hard. That's really difficult to accept, isn't it?
Yeah. No. Sorry. Go on.
No,
Sorry.
no, no, that's done.
No, you're absolutely right. And what you've just described there
Mm,
was my football career, because
right.
I don't just a personal view. I don't drink alcohol.
All right.
Coming through in a football environment, a young professional footballer coming up and things like that. lads like to go out, lads like to, and I used to go out and I used to enjoy my time, but I didn't used to drink alcohol. And that was something that, like exactly what you said, people used to find as a literally a mission of theirs to
Yeah.
get to have a drink. And it was that if I was just doing that just because I thought, oh, you know what, it's the good thing to do, I imagine I would have had the drinks, and I wouldn't still not drink alcohol now, but I
Mm.
don't because I've got enough of a reason to. And it's like exactly what you said there. I think it's that accountability of, and what I call ownership of owning that and understanding that, like, don't get me wrong, there's going to be certain external factors, mates getting in the way, people trying to peer pressure, things, situations you're in. But when you've got enough of that ownership and reason, then it keeps you on that, what I suppose you'd call the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, you're right. It's that difference. But I always talk about, like, again, when I was a PT a while back, and someone would come to me, and one of my questions would be, what makes you want to lose weight? And they say, oh, I hate the way I look. And I'm like, that's not going to cut it when it gets hard.
Mm,
I hate myself is not going to motivate you when it gets really difficult. What
mm.
if you respected yourself enough to make better decisions for yourself? It has to start that way, surely.
Yeah, that's the ownership side of it,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah. Hey, like, positive change or meaningful change doesn't come from a miserable place very often.
it? No, no, no.
It can do, but like it doesn't very often. I hate myself, girls. I'm not going to go out with you on Friday for cocktails because I hate myself. That don't sound right.
I, I think pain. I think pain will get you moving,
Hmm,
but pleasure will keep you going.
love that.
You know,
Yeah.
so I think exactly. I agree with you 100% because I think pain, whatever way you want to call that, can be a great motivator, a great kickstart. For
Mm,
example, someone wants to lose weight, they never lose weight. They say they're going to, they're never going to, they never do, they never do, they never do. They go and see the doctor. The doctor says that you need to change something radically now because this is going to happen. This has happened. All of a sudden, pain then is a big starter for you. But when you start to get yourself back on track, that's not going to keep you moving because you might clear yourself of that heart disease, of diabetes, whatever it may be. That if that's still driving you, once you're clear of that, you've got no reason to move forward.
yeah.
When you have that, when you after that pain gets you going, when you can then latch onto the pleasure of whatever it may be, the feeling great, looking sexier, whatever it may be, then all of a sudden you've got something that wants to keep you moving towards it. So I always
Yeah.
think that's a key one.
And I think it has to be that internal factor, doesn't it? Because I've seen it before where, I've seen it more frequently in women, and they come in and they talk about all of these great things like their jeans fitting, their husband paying them a compliment, or their friends paying a compliment. They feel great. And then they step on the scales, which is the external measure, and they haven't lost weight. And then they're really down. I'm like, but you just you
Yeah,
just
yeah,
told me all these amazing things. And it's just like,
yeah.
that's why I think it has to be a feeling, doesn't it? It has to be something that can't be taken away from you or is reliant on something external. It has to be in you.
Right.
It has to be true to you. Otherwise, it's going to be easily persuaded
Oh,
in them
right.
in them tough moments. But listen, I think everybody knows that we're going to have a cracking conversation here. We already have. So thanks for coming on. And but if you could tell people a bit about you, about you and your journey so far, just for the people that haven't come across you yet.
Yeah, no worries at all. So I suppose starting at the very beginning, I'm born and raised in Essex, just outside of London. And as I say, any young childhood, the same way anyone would. Mum, dad, and sister. Parents divorced when I was 14, and that was a big moment in my life. And this may come up during this, but that led me down certain paths. Moved out of home when I was 16 and moved down to Southampton, where I started my professional football career. And at 16, as you say, still basically a boy moving out. 8 years as a professional footballer all around England, some as you touched on at the higher level. Spent 4 years at Southampton, up into Sheffield Wednesday, around Yorkshire, all the way up in Carlisle. And then around whenever that was, 8 years, 8 years after I was 16, 24, 25 years old, my career went into part-time. And because of the things that had happened in my life in, I'd say, those formative years, especially between the ages of, I'd say, maybe 18 to 22, I always knew psychology, mindset, human behavior fascinated me. It fascinated me. Not just why do I do what I do, but why does that person achieve X result? Or how comes that person can feel that way, that person can feel that way, but they're both from the exact same background.
Mm.
And things like this always used to fascinate me. And I remember I used to go home from training and just get buried in a book or watch YouTube videos until early mornings after training. And as I say, when my professional football career went into part-time, I was at a place where it was new to me. And initially, obviously, my thing is to bounce back. But after a while, I had so much time on my hands. When you go part-time in football, you spend Tuesday evenings and Thursday evenings and play on a Saturday. So I did a lot of qualifications. I did over the course of the next 5 to 6 years, I did qualifications in hypnotherapy, in life coaching, in neuro-linguistic programming, through my football with sports psychology. And I got a real depth of academic knowledge, I suppose is the word, around psychology that fascinated me. And then 6 months prior to COVID, I loosely set up a business called Made in the Mind. And 6 months later, COVID happened, part-time football completely shuts down. And I'm at a crossroads where I'm like, okay, well, something needs to happen here. And to fast forward the next, whatever it's been since COVID now, 3.5 years, the growth has been, I won't say it lightly, quite monumental. I've worked with some leading brands. I've worked with Shell. I've worked with Google. I've worked with Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. I've worked with Imperial College, London, all around mindset, psychology, human behavior, and giving people the strategies, tools, and breakthroughs that ultimately, one, is my story, but also is what I'm most passionate about, which is removing the mental and emotional blocks that hold people back, and then putting them in control. And what I mean by in control is we live in a world that is ever changing, ever changing. There's things are happening fast all the time. And the biggest mistake that I see people make, which leads to stress, overwhelm, frustration, fear, anxiety, depression, is that they try and control the external elements of their life. They try and control their eating, they try and control their gym, they try and control their relationship, their work, whatever it may be, loved ones around them. And in doing that, you're always at the beck and call of the emotions, the habits of other things. And when you do that, you leave yourself in such a vulnerable position where anxiety, depression, fear, stress, that thrives. That thrives in you when you're relying on these things to make me feel a certain way. And my thing is ultimately reversing that and living inside out as opposed to outside in, and saying, no, I'll put myself in mental and emotional control. I'll show you how to do that. And then the things that come into my life are a bonus. They will enhance me. They will upgrade my life in so many ways. But regardless of the unwavering uncertainty that happens out there, I stay in control in here. And as I say, that's been a long journey for me. That's why I talk about it so passionately. That's why I'm so driven about that. But it's also what I see a lot that the world needs right now, which is why I really want to deliver that as well.
Do you think there's a large part of that that comes with having to learn to or practice sitting with uncomfortable emotions?
Yes and no. I'd say yes, in the sense of I think we live in a very surface level emotional playing field at the moment. That's a lot of words. But what I mean by that is that we live in a very respectfully Instagram-like world where that's what we present, that's what we'll show emotionally as well. And I think that's why you see like divorce rates rising. I don't want to go too deep into that, but because people are much more surface level driven now, and it's much more about the words that come out to your mouth rather than the feelings that you can show someone. So I do think, to a certain element, to answer your question, yes, people have to sit with that. But I believe, like what we spoke about previous to this, when people can take accountability and ownership of what they're at, where they're at, why they feel the way they do, then for me, I talk about four pillars of freedom. That is number one, because if you want to free yourself from whatever it is that holds you back, the first thing is you need to be radically transparent about where you are. And when you can do that, that's where the ownership comes in. The quicker you can do that, the less time you have to sit with those unwanted feelings. So that
That's
would be,
nice.
that would be my take on that. And as I say, that comes from, and I'm thinking of one in particular. When I was learning about all this stuff, I saw two people who had the exact same upbringing, the exact same circumstances. Life dealt them the exact same hand. And one went on to be incredibly successful in their financial career, physical career. emotionally as well, and one less so, let's say. And that fascinated me.
Mhm.
I was like, how? And then when I uncovered really why, the first thing they did is that this person said, life won't define me. I'll make life, I say, oh, life is always happening for me, not to me.
Yeah.
And when you adopt that approach, you don't have to sit with those negative feelings for too long, because you put yourself back in the driving seat to move forward.
See, there'll be people that that's really jarring for, but that's because they're resisting the accountability. They're resisting it. You know, they're like they don't want it. They don't want that because they don't feel good, or that means they have to admit things to themselves they don't want to be true.
It's
And
uncertain as well. It's
yeah,
uncertain. You
there
know,
is. That's an anxiety, isn't it? You
yeah,
know.
when you people, I think, often believe as well, and from what I've seen, is that people believe that if you take accountability, ownership of that, one, you might have to take blame, which I don't
Mm,
think is the case. There's a difference between ownership and blame.
agreed.
And but I think another thing is that people feel like they have to possibly relive or re-encounter what it was that made them feel this way at the moment. But that's not necessarily the situation. We can look at circumstances in our lives from a logical, rational, clear approach, and not get emotionally too in depth in that, and still take ownership, I believe.
Yeah.
So I think exactly what you're saying there, that it can be so uncertain that people go, you know what, I'll just lock that away over there for a while and I'll just carry on. Life's not so bad.
I think for me, something that really helped me move into that space was recognizing that you're never really certain about what's going to happen. It's sort of an illusion, you know.
You
It like
know, absolutely.
yeah, you're like that sort of, oh, I know this is going to happen, or this is going to happen on Wednesday, or whatever it is. You know, you don't know that for sure. And I think once I started to get to what I define as acceptance,
Mm.
it's just an acceptance of things. It doesn't mean, like you say, it doesn't mean you forgive anybody, or it doesn't mean that you like it. It's just an acceptance. Just I accept this, and it's like the quicker you can get there, the less resistance, conflict, and drama you sort of upheave for yourself, and you don't have to battle with all that stuff that's not necessary. You don't have to do it. We sort of choose to, in a way. You know, it's just like keep fighting that battle, stay in that rumination, you know, whatever it is.
100%. I mean, I don't feel like there's loads I need to add to that, but 100%, I'm total agreement.
So when you said there about like the two people, one made a success of their life, the other one not so, like when I was up on the mountain, and I'm sure when you were out doing the marathons, there's sort of, it feels almost like it's training you to be able to endure that uncomfortable feeling, you
Mm.
know, because you're there and it's not going away. And it's like, I love what you said about the mountain is not going to change for you. It doesn't care if you get to the top. It doesn't care if you like it. It doesn't care about any of that. It's like, I'm not changing. And I'm pretty
Mm.
sure that they're not going to change the ultra marathon rules and go, actually, let's just do 90,
Of
90
course.
miles. He looks tired. Let's give him 90 miles.
I
You
wish they
know,
did, but they
yeah, I bet you do.
don't.
You know, and it's like that realization that, okay, it's on you now. And it doesn't really, like, the mountain doesn't care, the ultra marathon doesn't care, and in some cases you're around people that might not care,
Mm.
and you can obsess over that if you want. You can obsess over how they feel about it and all those things, but all you're really doing is avoiding the feelings that are going on within yourself. You're not addressing those things, which is what you're saying, the stuff that you can actually do something about. Like the other stuff you can't, you know. Is that am I in the right sort of?
Absolutely. I think, and I want to be very sort of respectful, and hopefully your listeners can sort of feel me through what I'm saying here, through my words, is that I think we live, especially now, in a time where we're always looking to point external blame. And people do that because of the fact we live in this surface, shallow level emotional state. Because the moment you don't look out there for the reason of why you feel this way, or why you have this, or why, however true that may be, I want to be completely respectful of that. The fact that if we always look externally, we will never be able to develop, grow internally. And it's the moment of just releasing yourself. And the reason I say this is, I say, I don't mind touching on it in so much detail, is I spent a period of my life where a close family member and I didn't have a relationship, and someone who mattered a lot to me, and we didn't have a relationship. And for the best part of 7 years of my life, it was blame. And what I mean by blame is, this is the reason, you are the reason I feel this way. because you did this, this is why my life is like this. I can't develop in these areas because of this. And that was, as I say, for years, about 7, 8 years of my life, my mindset around this. And like I do, I was in one of my rabbit holes in YouTube at 3 a.m. and someone who I was listening to at the time was talking to someone, and I was watching this like live intervention on YouTube, and they said, "You've got some nerve," to this person, and it sort of shocked me. I was like, it's like, you want to blame them for all the, I nearly swore. You want to blame them for all the bad things in your life. You want to blame them for all the things that have gone wrong. You want to blame them for everything that has happened in your life that you're not happy about. Yet you're that selfish. This is what the guy was saying. You're that selfish. You won't blame them for all the beautiful and amazing things you have in your life. You won't blame them for the fact that you're proud of the person you are now. You won't blame them for the fact that because they weren't the person that you wanted them to be, you have developed skills and traits and behaviors within you that make you incredibly passionate, incredibly driven, make you care about people so much. And the way that and this hit me like a ton of bricks. And it just hit me. And I remember sitting there, and obviously the tears flow for me and things like this. And the next morning I picked up the phone to this close family member, and I pretty much recited that. And it wasn't a technique, it wasn't a strategy, it was something that we all have them moments that catch us and get us.
The truth.
The truth, exactly, the truth. And for me, it come out, and I said pretty much that. I said, for the last 7 years, I've blamed you for this. If I'm going to blame you for that, I'm going to blame you for the man I'm proud to be. I'm going to blame you for the fact that I've got a relationship with my partner now, who I'm incredibly blessed with, and she is the most incredible person in my life. And I have that, and I cherish and I value her so much, because I understand what it's like to be without that love, and all of these things. And it come out, and it just completely opened that door in my mind. Now, you can't change the past, like exactly what we spoke about. I can't wrestle with that. I can't change things. I can't do that. We and my close family member have worked on understanding each other's model of what's gone on.
Mm.
But from this perspective now, it was almost like a line in the sand of saying, what's been's gone. What can we create now? But what I unwittingly did in and amongst that was exactly what you've said about took ownership through the video, took ownership of that situation. And I said, you know what? I've been blaming there for so long. I've been blaming externally for so long, but that's not going to change the way that I feel. The mountain is not going to change.
Mm.
What I can do is reframe how I feel about it and then find my way up that mountain.
It's so hard. I mean, I had a history of, was beaten as a child quite significantly. There's a lot of childhood torture and psychological and physical stuff. And for a very long time, I blamed my father for all of the things that he did. And, they were his fault. And later in life, because I didn't want to accept what had happened, I used to drink, and I drank a lot, and that addiction was born through that process. But for me, when I came to acceptance, it meant letting go of blame. It meant letting go of blame. And, you just gave me full body like goosebumps when you were talking, because you're right. And it's so difficult to do, because it feels like forgiveness. It feels like you're saying, oh, it's okay what you did. I'm not saying that, and people say, how can you accept what he did? And the first thing I say is, what choice do I have? It's happened. But secondly, I don't necessarily accept what he did. I accept how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. I accept how I feel about it, because again, that's me, not him. I don't know, I've come to understand through compassion a little bit more about his upbringing and how he was subjected to public floggings and things like that. And that must have been difficult. Now, that's not me making excuses. That's me trying to understand how someone can find himself in that position. Because when I had a child, I had a whole nother experience where I had this new context of being a dad, and I was holding my son, and I was in love, and I was making all these promises, and I was thinking, wait, how the hell? It went from why did he do it to how did he do it? Because I couldn't get my head around it. But these are all ruminating things. These are all keeping me where I don't want to be. And I tell you something, nothing will be harder to accept than the things you don't want to be true. Now, we have to put aside whether we want them to be true or not, they are. And that's the bit that's difficult. That's the bit that's really, really hard. And I'm not saying it's easy. Oh, Johnny said just accept it. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you really want to, if you have to make a decision that you're going to accept it and then move towards that, that was my method anyway.
Yeah, no, and firstly, obviously, I'm very sorry to hear that. But from what you spoke about, we're 100% singing off the same hymn sheet there, and I 100% am in agreement with everything that you've said. I think, like what you said there, it almost starts and ends with that decision. And
Yeah,
like, hopefully, I'll get the language right of what you said. It's not acceptance of what they did, but acceptance about how you feel
yeah,
about it. And I
yeah,
think that is huge. And that it also alludes to what I was touching on before, is that it's not blaming in terms of you need to divert that blame onto you. No, it's just ownership of that and saying, you know what, I can't control that. I
yeah.
can't control anything that goes on outside of this body and mind of mine. But what I can do is accept, take ownership, look inwards here and say, how can I keep coming back to it, how can I navigate a different way up that mountain?
Yeah, because that alcohol just kept me where I didn't want to be. It kept me
Mm.
ruminating and thinking about the past, things I couldn't do anything about. And
Mhm.
I'd sit there and I'd drink. And it's funny because there's a contradiction that comes with my addiction. And people say, "Why do you think you drunk?" And I said, "Well, I drunk to connect with my emotions." They say, "Oh, right." I said, "Yeah, but I also drunk to disconnect from my emotions." And it's just like,
Yeah.
it sounds contradictory, but that's how it was for me,
Mm.
And eventually I got to a point where, and don't get me wrong, some days I unupset it, tired, hungry, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and I might get a little bit emotional about something and it might trigger something and I have to go through it. Them days, I just call it a day. I go to bed early
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
next day I'm all right again, But it isn't easy. And I don't want to put out there like we're saying, oh, just accept what's happened to you. Because when you work in industries like we do, you hear things that you can't believe what some humans are capable of doing to each other, and you hear some really horrible things. So to just hear the words, "Oh, just accept it," I get it. That's jarring. That's difficult. That's anger inducing.
Mm.
However, that doesn't mean it's not true,
No, and
which is
no,
also hard.
oh, no, no, I agree with you, and I think, and as I said, it's what I sort of touched on at the start. Hopefully, people can feel what we're saying through our words. Is that I agree. It's not in the sense of just do this, you'll be fine. Just
Yeah.
do this, just crack on, because it's not as if we're reading. It's a textbook. I think we're
Mm,
both coming from a place of we've experienced this. Not saying it's necessarily the easiest thing to do. Not saying
mm,
it's necessarily the at the time feels the best when you first get into the nitty gritty of it.
mm.
But the other side of it is the most liberating and freeing side of
That's
it.
that's that's exactly the word. It's freedom.
Yeah.
It's freedom. I no longer feel compelled to ruminate and think about all those things that make me feel like crap. I don't
Mhm.
want to think about them anymore. And sometimes I get caught off guard. I might get in the car after the school run and the song comes on and it triggers me in some way. And I don't even really love the word triggers because it's sort of passing the buck a little bit, But for me, it's about understanding that that's exactly the right word, freedom. It offers you this freedom to just get on and stop looking behind you and start looking in front of you and
And
start
yeah,
moving towards what you want.
and I think exactly what you said there for you, for yourself. You said obviously I call it masking. You mask them emotions. For you, it's through drink. For myself, I necessarily didn't have an outlet like that, but it used to swarm me in anxiety and depressive traits and things like this. And that was what I used to quote live with in the same way that you spoke about. So I think we're both speaking about it from an aspect as well of not just going through that hard bit, but of doing the other way, which really doesn't work, which
Yeah.
really is beneficial, which really doesn't make you feel great in any way, shape, or form, and saying, look, no, it's not no, it's not necessarily the most straightforward or feels the nicest, but just take those couple of steps and through that tunnel is the what we said there, the freedom, the liberating side of it.
So there'll be people that go, okay, so you're saying accept it, and I get it. You're saying it in this way, and you don't mean it this way, but how do I do it? And I think for me, it's about making a decision first and foremost that I want to.
Mm,
In order to do something like this, it's hard living that way, that ruminating way, that addictive way, that angry way, that blaming way. It's hard. It's also
mm,
hard to change.
mm.
Now, I'm not going to say choose your hard because that's really corny, but it is about making your mind up. In a way, part of the confusion and the conflict comes from not really being sure about what you want,
Yeah,
having that clarity.
I think, and it's something that I work on. I'm sure you do as well with people. Is that people say to me they want to change things like this, but they say it's hard to change, or I can't change, or this is the way that I am. I'd say two things around this. I'd say number one is what I touched on before, in the sense is that people want to lose weight, they want to lose weight, they want to change, they want to lose weight, they want to lose weight, they want to lose weight. When they go to the doctor and they say, look, early onset diabetes, heart disease, whatever it may be, is there, change happens in an instant.
Mm.
So my personal belief around this, in this is something that I talk a lot about on my page, is change doesn't take time. Change happens in a moment. And what I mean by that is people might be able to relate. Anyone who's been in a relationship that they're no longer in for maybe a bit longer than what they want it to be, it didn't take you 5, 10 years to end that relationship. It took 5, 10 years of all of those things for you to get to a moment to say, no more, enough is enough. I won't tolerate this. This is it. This is the end. And what a big thing of what I do is, obviously, like professionally, is get people to that moment of change. Because when you can, and you can cultivate, when you can cultivate that moment of change, and that's different for each of us, but that's why I touched on the leverage points. Because when I can understand what makes you tick, or what makes someone else tick, and what makes someone else value something higher than their problem, we all do, we all value something higher than the current problem we have. When you can find that and you can tap into that, people can change in a moment. And then once you've done that, for me, which leads me to the second point, the lasting change is what I call identity. And that is that identity is the who you see yourself as. My belief is that the identity is the strongest force in the human psyche, because your identity is how you see yourself. And what I mean by that is the honest man will always justify a way, even when he's been lying. Do you know what I mean? That, and what I mean by that is that how you see yourself will shape everything. And what I mean by that is that there's no coincidence that when you see yourself as someone who is happy, vibrant, energetic, fun-loving, carefree, amazing things happen. You're spontaneous, you enjoy great things in life. When you see yourself as anxious, depressive, sad, bad things always happening to me, and it's not a sort of a surface level belief, but that's who you see yourself as, that's who you live as, these things pile up. And I think after you've created that shift and that change, the big thing is then creating this identity of, okay, who is it that I want to be? Forget the external, forget I want to live in a 4-bedroom house and live in the suburbs and have this and have the wife and husband and kids. No, forget that. Who do I want to be? Who is it that I talk about for myself? Who does Matt Young want to see himself as? And for me, this was a process. I talk about this from experience. And for me, it was writing, and really going into detail. And when I did that, I had someone in my mind over there, and I'm just pointing in front of me for those of us who are just listening to this, pointing, I had someone there in front of me who I wanted to step into. And then I can create behavioral habits. Then I can create traits. Then I can create ways of being that align with that person, not this old identity that's stuck back here that ultimately I want to get rid of now. So for me, that's always a huge thing, because I deal with it a lot, and that's why I talk about it, is that people say to me, I am this way, or it's hard to change. And respectfully, I'd say it's not who you are, it's the pattern you've been running.
Mm.
You've been running that pattern for so long that you think that's who you are, but it's not. Because the same way that you've been running that depressive pattern, I can show you how to run the happy pattern, and you can condition that one instead. And trust me, it feels a lot nicer. So
Yeah. What we practice, we become good at.
exactly.
You know?
And I do really leverage that when I work with people, simply because I know how strong that can be. And when you can live from that place of, this is who I am, I'm this happy, confident, and I use buzzwords like this for people, and I get people to choose their own, because then people own it. Then they're like, no, I am this happy, confident, vibrant person, whatever it may be. And we have ways of implementing that. Then all of a sudden, you've got a linchpin, you've got an identity there that's like, if something don't marry up with that, then that's not me. That's not who I am. I'm
It's
not
your
going to.
values. It's your
I'm not.
values, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not who I'm going to get involved with. I'm this happy, vibrant, confident person. This stress state comes into my life. I deal with it. I navigate it. I move past it, because that's not who I am. As opposed to sitting in that and going, "Oh, another thing's happened to me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when I work with people, one of the first thing I do is try and identify their values. And what I find more often than not now is that people don't know what their values are. Their values are very changeable, and their values are attached to making other people feel happy, which means that they're never going to be fixed. So they don't know who they are. So they've got no foundation to build anything from because there's nothing that's stable, you know? And I think, like, if I would encourage the way you just articulated all about the last maybe 5 to 10 minutes, that right there is gold. That is absolutely, if anyone, like, play that back as many times as it takes to get your head around it, because what he just said was bang on the money. Like, that, he's not saying it's easy. He's not saying, oh, you're just going to hop, skip, and jump into it. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. And I think it comes down to a point where, have you had enough of living this way that that way looks a little bit easier, you know, or a little bit more doable, or a little bit more desirable, or at least worth a try, whatever it is that gets you your foot in the door, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, still good. Yeah, absolutely. I'm in total agreement. And as I say, I think the quicker we said about acceptance and ownership, but also when it's that moment of change, when you can gather enough reasons as to why now I need to change. And the reason I say now is because if I said to you again, well, I know we'll keep coming back to it, but it's just the analogy of losing weight. And if I
Mm.
said to you, look, if you carry on the way that you're doing it in the next 5 to 10 years, you could get heart disease. People are going to be like, okay, well, I can sort that out later down the line. Versus you go and see the doctor and the doctor says, look, this isn't looking great. You need to change right now. All of a sudden, whoa, change happens in a moment.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think that's the key thing.
One of the most powerful things that has ever shown me, you know, one of the reasons why I became the self-development coach and I did the podcast and I do all these things that I'm doing now that I like to think are helping people, and that's the feedback I get, is because I did something called the rocking chair test. And
Okay.
it's when you do a meditation, it takes you to 90 years old when you're in the future. And you sit back in your rocking chair and you think about your life, the things that you regret, the things that make you proud. And there's one thing that really stuck in my mind, is that there was something that if I didn't try to do what I'm doing right now, I would regret it. And there'd be nothing I could do about it. I'll be 90 years old. I wouldn't be able to go back and change it. I would have sat there wondering, I wonder what would have happened if I'd started a podcast. I wonder what would have happened if I'd become the self-development coach. I wonder. Oh, by the way, there's nothing you could do about it. But then you come to my age now, 21. Don't laugh. And then all of a sudden you realize that you can, you know, and that's the same with that, like being overweight and being told in 5 years' time you have heart disease. Now, fast forward 5 years' time, you've got heart disease. There's nothing you can do about it. You've got it now. You can't reverse it. You're stuck with it. You're now on a certain path and you have no control. Now, I've told you that you're experiencing all the emotions, the regrets, the wishing I should have done this, I should have done that. If only I could go back in time. Ah, but you can, because you're
Mm,
not that person in 5 years. You're this person now who can do something about it.
mm,
And that's the magic of it. For me, it was like, right, well, I'm going to try, because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I'd rather sit back at 90 and think, oh, at the very worst, at least I tried and it didn't work.
mm.
But I tried everything I had and it just wasn't for me. Instead of, oh, I wonder what would have happened if I had done this. I can't handle that feeling. So I'm not going to do that.
That's a really great one. That I haven't heard of that rocking chair test. I've heard of sort of similar analogies, but I haven't heard of that. And that's really, really good. And yeah, I like that one. I think again, the same sort of thing. What you're doing, I suppose, if you strip it back, is exactly what we said about is you're bringing enough pain to now, in the sense of
Yes.
you're bringing all that pain in and around the way that you're going to feel and experiencing that as where you are now, and saying, right, now bring yourself back to the present day. Boom, now's the time to change. But the reason is because exactly what you said, you felt all of those emotions of what it's going to feel like. You felt all the despair, the anguish, all that type of thing. So yeah, strong. I really like that
Yeah,
one.
it's as close to a time machine as you can get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like in that moment when you've really messed up or something's happened or whatever, you're living a life you don't want to live, but you don't have any, you have now got limited choices.
Mm.
Being able to come back to that moment and go, actually, I don't. That's power, man.
Yeah, I
For
love
me,
it.
yeah.
I love it.
So we're going to change lanes a bit. Based off of what you've noticed, how would you describe the present condition of human mental and emotional well-being? So what are you seeing all the time at the moment? Like, what are the trends, you know, taking consideration the recent pandemic and all of the financial stuff and everything that's going on? What are you seeing at the moment?
I think on a deeper level, it's fear.
Mm,
On a more surface level, people present stress, anxiety traits very often. Um, that's from my experience. Overwhelm that obviously stems from stress, things like this. That would be what I see, but underneath that it is fear, and I think that stems from, as human beings, and this goes worldwide, wherever you're born, whatever culture, whatever upbringing you've had, our deepest fear is that we're not enough. And if we're not enough, we won't be loved. And that is the human condition. That's what I've been obsessed with learning about. That's what I've been obsessed with understanding, is that if we feel like we're not enough, we won't be loved. And I think when you face a situation where there's been so much uncertainty, so much change, so much I'm relating to COVID here, so much upset, I suppose, in so many different ways in your life, in your mental state, in your emotional state, in how you live. What you then do is find yourself in a situation where not only externally are you out of routine, but internally, your normal routine of who you are, who you really thought you was as a person, gets shattered because you're having to develop completely new skills, develop completely new ways of being, of adapting, of feeling your emotions, of even getting out and exercising, which we know has so many health benefits. That the knock-on effect that we're seeing as a result of that, in my opinion, is because people have come from such a rattled emotional state during COVID due to so many different reasons, that we're now getting the byproducts of that. And what you see is that because people are still coming out of that uncertainty state, stress, overwhelm, fear, anxiety, depression in some cases is presenting itself, when underneath that, really, it's that fear of, are we enough within ourselves? Now, as I said, I always come back to it that when you can take control of all that, almost fill your own pint glass yourself, make yourself more than enough within yourself. And I don't use that language as like wishy-washy, but make yourself more than enough within yourself. Then the bonus that I get from my partner, the bonus that I get from my work life, my social content, my social communication, even whatever else it may be, are things that make my pint glass overflow.
yeah.
I'm not trying to get that pint glass to fill up. And that's a roundabout way of saying that I think that the human, I know you said about the mental and emotional state of where we live at the moment. I don't think it's a million miles from where we want it to be, but it can feel like that because of the surface level presentation that we're all having at the moment.
Yeah.
As if there was that small 2-degree shift of changing from the living this world outside in to inside out, then all of a sudden I think you'd see a lot more vibrancy, a lot more happiness. But generally, the way that the cycles of life work is that we go through a time like this, and then this will produce and this will reap some new life. It will reap some better times ahead. 100% it will. And you'll see with that, naturally, emotion and mental states will rise with that. And we'll go through a good period of time. And then something else will happen and that will drop off. And if you look at life over the last 150 years, it has always taken this cycle. But I think to keep a control within ourselves through all of that, why rely on that cycle out there? Why
It,
not?
you make me think of like a forest fire. You know, like when a forest fire comes, it looks awful, doesn't it? But then not long after, you get all these little green shoots and new growth, and you know, fast forward 5 years, and you've got this beautiful flourishing forest, and it all starts from the ashes of what was there before. You know, and also I wondered, what's your thoughts? Do you think that if we say we called what you said self-worth,
Mhm.
would you say that people are linking their self-worth to social media, and again they're using that as a measure of who they are, how many likes they get, how many whatever they get on social media? You see that a
Yeah,
lot?
yeah. I think our self-worth, when I mean my analogy of self-worth is ultimately how we see ourselves emotionally. And I think, as I say, we live in such a I keep coming back to the same sort of points, but we live in such a surface level world at the moment where we present our best life, we present all the great things that are happening, we present the wonderful things. And if it's not that, we just bury it away and, pretend it didn't work and try and move past it as quick as you can without ever really dealing with that side of things. But you and I both know the deepest level of self-worth comes when you're halfway up that mountain. It's not a case of saying, you know what, let's just turn around, let's just quit, let's just walk back down. But self-worth comes, and self-pride and these types of things come from when you carry on up that mountain and in challenging times, and you see people who prosper in challenging times, in whatever realm that may be, in their childhood, in their adolescence, in their adult life, when they've been through challenging things. The level of self-worth comes from because they know where they've been and what they've gone through.
Yeah. The
But
evidence.
the evidence of that, and it's not evidence that someone shows you, it's evidence that you know within yourself. You see it, you feel it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's evidence to yourself. I love that word. And I think now we don't let ourselves, and I do say the word let ourselves, we don't let ourselves experience those emotions because we're so surface level that we leave all those to one side. And if something dare comes up that makes us feel that little bit uncomfortable, it's blame. It's that person's fault. It's their fault.
Wow. Yeah.
They shouldn't make me feel this way. How dare you make me feel like that? When really, respectfully, you can't, like what we've touched on this whole time we've been talking, you can't control anything out there. You can't control the way that things come in. Like, you can't control necessarily what that person's going to say or the way that person's going to act. But how about instead you develop the tools to be able to navigate through that, be able to say, you know what, you live your life. I'm going to continue to live this, what I said before, happy, vibrant, prosperous way, for example. That's who I am. That's what I'll live. And I've lost the question of train of thought now because I've gone off on a tangent. But
No. But we're just talking about like human condition and attaching it to social media.
yeah, that was the one, to social media. I think that because there's such a fixation, it's such a huge thing, and media and all these types of things now, the celebrity culture is so rife that we get so attached to that, and we see that surface presentation of what things, the way things should be. And if we're dared experience anything else, we'll shut that away. We'll shut that away because you know what? That's not what the world wants to see now. And this comes back to what I said. The deepest fear of any human is that we're not enough. And if we're not enough, we won't be loved. So that's why we shut those anxiety, those depressive, those guilty, sad, upsetting feelings away. We daren't look at them. We'll rather blame out there and say that's the reason why, because if we accept that, we might not be what the world wants us to be at the moment, which is this presentation of perfection.
Yeah, which doesn't exist. Show me
Doesn't
this person, it's perfect because I haven't met them.
it?
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, you're so right, and there's so much to that. You're right. You find what you're looking for in them moments that you're avoiding,
Mm,
and the reason you're not finding it is because you're avoiding most of the most valuable things that I've ever earned, and I'm not talking about superficial things. I'm talking about internal things. Have come from something that I wished at some point hadn't happened. The
mm.
truth of the matter is, I'm not sat here doing this with you if I didn't go through what I went through with my dad. That's quite hard to accept. It's true,
No,
though. It is true.
yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think you articulated that perfectly. And yeah, a coach of mine once said, when you can realize that your worst day is actually your best day,
Oh,
practice it.
wow.
And obviously that's quite deep. And again,
Yeah.
some of these things I hear at the time and they don't really resonate at the time, but I'll go away with them, and sometimes it might be a couple of days, weeks, months, years later, and I'll think back and I'll be like, you know what, that time that I had, as I say, between 18 to 22 for me, which was the real tough time, was actually the best day because it's now led me on this journey that I'm on now. But it's exactly what you said there. It's tough at the time. It's tough to do that at the time. But when you can do that and accept that, freedom.
Yeah, freedom, man. And I never forget this proverb I heard. It said, "Dad, every year you get smarter and smarter."
Mm,
And
mm.
it's not the dad getting smarter; it's the kid's awareness.
Yeah,
As
right.
he gets
Yeah,
older.
yeah, nice.
I loved that. It took me a while to get my head around that one, to be fair.
It's good.
Uh, so obviously we've got off on one, and I've loved this conversation. So I'm gonna select the questions carefully, but I think some people believe attempting to manage their mental health could be harmful. You know, it's
Mm.
that word manage. They think, oh, you're managing it. You want to get rid of it, is what people think they want to do. They want to get rid of this bad feeling or whatever it is. And that can create a conflict or resistance in some cases. How would you respond to this perspective? And what are some steps individuals can take to prioritize their mental well-being?
It's funny. In my language of this, I don't use the word manage either. I
No.
don't, my personal view on this is I don't like to, my choice isn't to use the word manage or cope with,
Mm.
because I'm huge on identity. And if I'm managing and coping with it, then really I'm still attached to that person who's experiencing that,
Yes.
trying to make the best of that. So in my language, as I say, I wouldn't use that either. Now, at the same time, I do also believe it's, I don't know if naive's the right word to say that you can rid yourself of this, because I feel stressed, I feel overwhelmed, I feel upset, I sometimes feel a little bit angsty around certain things. 100%. I'm not a robot, but the difference between me and, for example, me of 5, 6 years ago is that now I don't stay there.
Yeah.
I know how to shift that. I know, and trust me, I'm always working on this, but the more and more I do it, the quicker and faster I can shift out of that state into the states that I want to be in. So for me, it isn't so much a case of managing or coping with their mental well-being or mental health, because again, for me, that is almost attached to a negative frame of reference. It's more so a case of becoming aware of the states, the emotional states you don't want to be in, and then having the tools, the strategies, the principles, the mechanisms, whatever word you want to use there, to, I use the word break free from them, break free from that limiting emotion. And I use a 3-part formula for this, and this is at the cornerstone of everything. I can share it if you wish. I use a a three. God, I lost my language. I use a 3-pillared formula for this. And for me, number one is all emotion starts in the body. All emotion starts in the body. And what I mean by that, it isn't some nice thing to say, go out and exercise. But if I said, for example, depressive person A is stood behind this door, even your listeners now, if I said, imagine that person, depressive person A is behind this door, what do they look like? Not, for example, 6 foot with curly hair, but what do they look like physiologically? What are their shoulders? Are they back and down, or are they rounded? Are they looking down, or are they looking up? Are they breathing shallow, or are they full and deep? Now, generally, we've all got the same image in our mind. Looks hunched over, looking down, maybe arms crossed, maybe breathing up here. Now, that isn't something that we're all just incredibly smart about. These are laws of human emotion. And when you neglect these, they invoke certain emotions. When you abide by them and you use your body in certain ways, you access different emotions. For example, something very simple that you can take and your listeners can take is their eyes. When you look to the ground, you access the vision. Sorry, when you look to the ground, you access the inner talk and feeling part of your brain. That's why whenever you're sad or you're deep in thought, you're looking to the ground here. When you look to the sky, you access the visual creative part of your brain. Now, anyone listening to this, and you can try it now, if you look to the sky and literally put your eyes up to the sky now, you'll find it incredibly tough to feel sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. Yeah.
you can also try that vice versa. You can also look to the ground and try and become happy. And that's also incredibly sad. Also, for a little tip for you guys, when you see someone lying, they're always looking up towards the sky because it's the visual creative part of their brain. They're trying to construct whatever it is. So I think when people
You
understand,
just got a lot of people in trouble.
I know, when people can understand first thing, because we're so obsessed with the mind when it comes to mental health and mental well-being, we're so obsessed with it. When we can understand that the actual epicenter of emotion is in the body, you take control of this physiology. If I said a strong, confident, assured person is behind door B, you know as well as I do, and people listening, that the physiological difference between looking at person behind door A and door B is completely different. They haven't said anything, they haven't told you what they're thinking, none of that, just the way they're holding themselves. And to go a little bit sciencey for people who like the data behind it, we have something that in our body called the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve governs the parasympathetic nervous system, and this controls 80% of basically the neurons in your body. That what I mean by that is the neurons in your body are going from body to mind in the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve governs your rest and relaxation, your rest and digest, your breathing, that type of thing. Now, the key thing I said there is that 80% of that is body to mind. So when I take control of my breath, this is why breath work is so huge now. When you take control of your breath, when you take control of your physiology, when you do that through meditation, through yoga, from whatever it may be, 80% of you is in control of the way that you're talking to yourself on a neuro level. Now, from that, I'm going into a little bit deeper here. From that, then we can get to the part where people like to focus on the most, which is the mind. Because the mind, what's wrong is always available, always available. And we can do that very easily. But so is what's right. What's wrong is always available in any given situation, but so is what's right. And what we choose to focus on at any given time will shape our reality. And what I mean by that is we don't experience life. We experience life through our lens of it. And to put that into context for people, I had two friends during COVID, naturally with my background, who had fitness businesses. Two friends, and pre-COVID, both reasonably successful, used to do well for themselves. COVID happens, things go on. One now has got a very large online fitness platform that he makes more money than he ever did pre-COVID. The other one no longer is a fitness coach, he's an accountant. Now, this isn't a slur against accountancy here, but what I'm saying is their focus at that time completely shifted their trajectory and where they've ended up. One focused on, I need to pivot, I need to change. How can I make this work during this challenging time? Another friend, as I say, these are people that I know, focused on, this must mean the end. I can't do it. And these were things, and he's not accountancy now because he's consciously chose that shift. He's unfortunately his fitness business declined and he had to step away from it. And as I say, at any given time, it's what they're choosing to focus on. You don't experience life, you experience it through your lens of what you call reality.
Yeah, that gives you so much more autonomy, that way of thinking.
Absolutely. And again, I come back to it, always puts you in control. Because once you've done that, and it's always, and I call it a pillar, or imagine a pyramid. The base is your physiology, your body. The middle part is that focus. Then the top of it, the almost like the sprinkles on top of the ice cream now, is what you choose to give meaning to and what you choose to act upon. Because the difference between that is, if that's going to create my reality the way that I've seen that situation, that's one thing. But then the things that are going to happen and the things that are going to come up in my life, what meaning am I giving to that? Is it empowering me or is it not? Am I choosing to act on that from a state and an emotion and a place of anger, frustration, sadness, or because I've chose to give it this meaning? Or am I choosing to act on it because I've reframed that meaning? I've found an empowering way for me to feel determined, passionate, driven, and then I choose to act from that state.
I love that.
Because when you can do those three things, and I put them in that order, and with that, if you can do that with more conviction, like we know what it's like we hear some of the greatest speakers, they talk with conviction, they give it such empowering meaning, and we believe them. We believe them. Imagine what they must be believing in themselves. Whereas as opposed to some people we sometimes see, they sort of talk like this, and they're saying, you've really got to take care of your mental health, and if you take care of your mental health, you'll be great. And we're like, well, I'm not going to believe you. You don't even you believe in yourself. what the meaning and the action that they're taking is always linked to the meaning that they've given. That's shaped by the focus and reality that they're experiencing, which underneath that stems from ultimately the state they've put themselves in. So they're the things.
So just so I think I've got it right. So it starts with the body,
Yep.
And the way I sort of took that was you stand in your strength instead of your weakness, you know.
Yep.
So whatever it is that's bothering you, instead of standing in that slumped way of being, you're standing strong, you're standing ready, prepared.
Yeah,
um
I tell it to give yourself and listeners something really good. Harvard actually done this study in 2012, and it's on YouTube. It was a TED talk by Amy Cuddy. Amy Cuddy did a TED talk. She's a professor at Harvard University. Cuddy spelt Cuddy, and her whole talk, I think it was 21-minute TED talk, was centered around power postures. Power postures. And during this talk, she explained, and Harvard have gone into detail in this, that by holding the superwoman pose, like hands on hips, chest out, things like this, testosterone rose 20%.
wow.
Risk risk taking rose 33% in their study. Cortisol level dropped 25%. The stress hormone dropped 25%. They haven't said anything, they haven't done anything. They got people to sit in different ways at the desk and they measured them. And as I say, this isn't me coming with it is me coming with this, but this is backed up by science and data from Harvard that physiology is at the absolute epicenter of emotion. When you put yourself in that state, and you I like the way you put it there, you stand in your power, you stand in your strength, then you put yourself in control of those emotions. Then if I choose to give meaning, give it and a reality to the things I want to see, the things I want that are going to empower me, the things that are going to uplift me, the things that are going to benefit me and my family, and things like this, I'm an unstoppable force.
Yeah,
Then all of
man.
a sudden, when my coworker says something, I'm like, I've got bigger things I'm moving towards here.
Yeah.
And whereas in a maybe a lesser state, let's call it, a lesser emotional or mental state, that might rock you. So
Yeah, mate, absolutely. I mean, standing in your strength, what you choose to focus can grow. So wherever you want to put your focus, will get stronger because you're focusing on it. Um, the meaning you put behind things. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. And if you take that from, again, it's making that choice, isn't it? Is that choice? Like, I don't like feeling this way. I'm going to do something about it. I suppose in a sense, it's like that principle of like, a certain song comes on, it makes you cry. Well,
mm,
equally, you go and watch a comedian, it makes you laugh, and it is a choice. There's a choice there, you know. Oh, I like that. I like that. I've never heard it explained that way before. Nice, like that.
I'm pleased it's a benefit. And as I say,
Yeah.
these it's a fascination for me. I'll be
Mm.
honest with you. Don't get me wrong.
You can see that. You can see the
I'm,
passion in it.
I'm fortunate I can call it a job, but it's a fascination for me in the sense of I'm absolutely obsessed to find these ways and present these ways. One, because as I say, it drives me, but two, I think because I've experienced, like what we said, that we can relate and we've got in common there. We've experienced the other side, the depths of the despair, the sadness, the guilt, the anxiety, the depression for myself, and I know what that feels like. And for me, and we wouldn't be doing what we did if we didn't care about people on a deep level, is that I don't want anyone else to experience it. I don't want anyone else to feel that level that I felt. Now, don't get me wrong, there's people who have had some what much quote worse things than me in life. So I don't get me wrong, I'm not taking it out of context, but from what I've experienced in the depths that I went to, I wouldn't want anyone else to feel anywhere near that. So if I can gather all of these ways, strategies, reasons to break through, the passion, the drive, the love, the energy, and know the real nitty gritty of what is the chokehold of what ignites passion, what gives people purpose, and then present that to people, we'll get back to that cycle of sprouting those leaves much quicker.
No, that's amazing. And I can feel that passion come off you, man. I mean, it's another trap, that whole thing there. Like you alluded to it at the beginning there about that comparison of like, we've been through this, but it's not, not saying it's as bad as this and as bad as that. I was talking to somebody on the podcast once and they said the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And I really liked that. It was nice and simple, because
Yeah,
people go through stuff, and if you did compare, there's always a different perspective, but at the end of the day, that person is feeling the way they feel.
yeah,
And actually, if there was a way of measuring it, it probably wouldn't be dissimilar to this other person who's going through something that perceptionally is worse, maybe, in some ways, in some gauge. So again, that's another trap, I think, as well. But Dude, you've been incredible to talk to. I had a whole, to be honest, I had a whole bunch of questions, but you've answered them all. You've answered them all. So I'm just gonna finish with one question, and is there anything you'd like to pass on to people that you think could help with their self-development?
I mean, I've got, if you wouldn't mind me sort of saying, I've got a toolkit that people can actually download.
Yep, absolutely.
On on my website. If you go www.madeinthemind.com/5 day mindset shift, I've created basically 8 to 12 minute videos that you can download completely for free. That
Wow.
you'll get in your inbox one every day for the next 5 days, and what we've spoke about in, I suppose, a bit more detail and a little bit more tailored to you, you can actually implement. And the things around identity, I give you 4 questions that can spark that within you. Things around the physiology, I go into a little bit more detail around focus and reality and the things that you can start to implement in your life to shift that side of it. Just across these 5 days, I think, or people who have been on that so far have found it really beneficial, and people have found that as a catalyst. And as I say, I think that would be a good starting point rather than just saying, oh, go and read this book or try this. It's actually a tangible thing you can actually do and start to implement yourself. So, yeah, by all means, www.madeinthemind.com/5 day mindset shift.
We'll definitely put that in the show notes for those that are driving and wish they had a pen. So we'll definitely do that. But I mean, mate, it's been an absolute, like, a real genuine pleasure. I've loved talking to you. I found everything you had, I've resonated with you greatly. We have a friend in common, Jamie.
Yep.
Clements, he's been on the podcast before, talking about breath work, and he said something really powerful. He said, like, out of all of the essential things that go on in our body, like our blood flow and our heartbeat and all those things, the breath work is the only one we can take control of,
Mm.
the way we breathe. And I think it all speaks to what you've said today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, 100%. I mean, for yourself, for Jamie, I feel like we're all brothers on the same path, if you like. We're all trying to implement in our own ways and different, and together, the uplifting of people, of human emotion, of things like that. So as much as I'm thankful for your nice words there, it's completely reciprocated, because this sort of platform, and as I say, I've listened to enough of the podcasts now and things like this, and it resonated with me. That's the reason why I sort of are on here now, I suppose, is that, yeah, I suppose it's a thanks to me, from me to you as well. One, for having me on, but also for having this platform where people, and hopefully your listeners, can gain so much value, and you have great people on like Jamie. And I listened to one last week that was absolutely mind blowing. That these sorts of things, these platforms are really going to give people that catalyst of change. So, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you very much as well.
Oh, mate, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that's the whole point of the self-development podcast, is to educate, inspire, encourage, all these different things. And you can only achieve so much in a short period of time of an episode. Otherwise, there'd be like Joe Rogan podcast and 4 hours long, and But I mean, what I'm trying to do here is just spread a bit of wisdom, shine a light on people that are doing incredible work and have got important messages. Sometimes that's people that have got a profession like yourself, and some people have been through something life changing, and sometimes it's both, like yourself. But either way, they've got something to pass along that can be helpful to someone, and it's that feeling of like not being alone,
Mm,
resonating, somebody finally saying something. Like I did a talk last year, and there was a group of people afterwards I was talking to, and they said, you articulated the way that I didn't know I felt. And it was just like that was a gift, that
yeah,
person said that to me. It's
yeah.
like they've had a feeling for a long time, and I said something and it just opened it up for them. And now because in my opinion, fundamentally, change has to start with awareness. What is it that needs to change? What's going on? What's the problem? And we don't want to think about it, but we want to bury our head in the sand because it's hard, and we don't want it to be true, and it hurts a little bit, and there's all this stuff we feel that we can't change, and all of that. It doesn't mean you shouldn't become aware of it, though, because if you're not aware of it, you cannot do anything about it. You just can't. You just
Exactly what your listener experienced through listening to you, and that it was almost like exactly what you said. They experienced something they didn't know was there until
Mm,
you said it. It was exactly the same thing for me, where I said about the video that I watched about blame.
mm.
At the time, like, it was just that, and it just hits you. So I think the more that this stuff's out there, 100%, when you can bring the awareness to it, people take ownership of that, it can be, and it can be the most liberating, freeing thing possible. So yeah,
Yeah,
long way.
love it. Listen, what's next for you, and where can people find you? Because I know people. I mean, I'll put that thing you just spoke about in the link
Yep.
so people can get to that easily. But where can they find you, get more of you, all those different things?
Well, I suppose I'm on Instagram as we all are. At mattyoung.mindcoach, mattyoung.mindcoach. Obviously on LinkedIn, Matt Young on there. Or if you want to find out a little bit more about my work, www.madeinthemind.com. I do a lot of speaking engagements as well. So you never know, you might be somewhere at some point at a festival or an event or an expo somewhere, and you might just see my face pop up on stage as well. So I do a lot of that. So I've got some exciting things coming up. One that I'm hoping I'm going to be able to release maybe within the next 2 to 3 days, that it's going to be really exciting. So yeah, all of that will be on my social channels.
Oh, mate, it's perfect. And once again, really, really grateful for your time today. You've blown my mind for sure. I got a lot. I'm going to be thinking about a lot of this stuff all night now. So I'm really grateful, and thank you so much for your time.
No, likewise, and thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.